Standing desk. Feel like I'm going to be expressive about this one, so I need room. Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about, honestly, my favourite TV show of all time, Doctor Who. In 2005 I was introduced to the Christopher Eccleston relaunch and I absolutely fell in love with the show. I thought it couldn't get any better, and then David Tennant came along, and then after another 3 seasons with him, I then went on strike because I couldn't believe that he had left the show. And 11-year-old Sian had never loved a man like she loved David Tennant. The heartbreak was real. But years later I rekindled my love for the show and had a much better appreciation for what Matt Smith brought to the role, and again with Peter Capaldi. And then the Jodie Whittaker era, that's probably for another video. So now, with years of time, investment, and a collection of Doctor Who cards that I bought during the lockdown to relive my childhood nostalgia, I am ready to embrace a new era of Doctor Who. Head writer from the original reboot, Russell T Davies is back with Ncuti Gatwa, who is an amazing actor, and I am more optimistic than ever that this series is going to be good. So here are the honest opinions of a long-time Doctor Who fan who will be really upset if this reboot is crap. For the sake of this video, I'm going to miss out the 3-part 60th anniversary specials because I think they're like their own thing, and instead I'm going to focus on the Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson series, starting with the Christmas special. This might be a long one, so strap in. So this episode is about baby snatching goblins that are attracted to coincidence and luck. They've locked onto our new companion Ruby Sunday and have been causing her to have a load of bad luck. We find out she was abandoned at birth on a church on Ruby Road, and she's now on the hunt for her biological parents through a TV show hosted by Davina McCall. The Doctor's already there doing a bit of investigating, but he doesn't really know what's going on yet. He also slays on the dance floor, which I feel like is setting the tone for this Doctor being like fun, excited, and maybe like a little bit flirty. More unlucky stuff keeps happening to Ruby, but now the Doctor's got her back. It's Christmas Eve and Ruby's birthday, and her adoptive mum have another foster baby coming to stay with them, Lulubelle.
Oh, a terrible name.
Oh, an absolutely terrible name.
Isn't it awful?
Rule number 1. Don't lose the baby.
I think I can guess what's going to happen. Ruby finds out there's no trace of her biological parents anywhere, and it sounds like Davina's also been having a series of bad luck. And then they kill her.
Davina?
Ruby gets off the phone and you guessed it, that baby is gone. But this girl is on it. She is out a window and up a ladder before the Doctor eventually catches up with her. And the Doctor's got these techie gloves, which makes it really easy to hold on to things. Could have been useful in that episode with Rose and the blimp. These goblins are actually terrifying. I hate them. I hate them. I hate them. Now on the goblin ship, we find out the baby is getting fed to the Goblin King. Then comes the best bit of this episode, the musical number. They managed to escape with Lulubelle, but it's not over. Now Ruby's disappeared and it's like she never existed.
I think you got me mixed up with someone else. Because there is no Ruby.
They make this dialogue with her mum really intense. Like, obviously, if Ruby was never adopted, then things would be different. Instead, she plays it like a weird robot with no emotions, like it's a bit extreme. And this is the first of many times the Doctor cries. The Doctor realises that the goblins went back in time and took Ruby as a baby instead, and that's why she never ended up with her adoptive mum. And the Doctor is back chasing goblins, this time to save baby Ruby. He uses the gloves to pull the ship down, and the Goblin King gets shish kebabbed at the top of the church. The ship then disappears and Ruby gets put back where she was meant to be. And then he even goes and saves Davina, thank goodness. And now Ruby's along for the ride. One other notable thing, Ruby's neighbour is weird. She watches the TARDIS disappear and acts like it's nothing. It's obviously going to turn to something else, but it's weird where she also like breaks the fourth wall and just talks to the camera.
Never seen a TARDIS before.
Overall, I'd say this episode was pretty solid. The Christmas specials tend to be a bit more whimsical in nature, and obviously they had to set up the background context for this new companion Ruby. On to the next. Straight away, this episode feels like a speed run of Doctor Who. It's like who he is, where he's from, the fact that he's the last of his kind. All this stuff that was previously introduced to characters slowly as the Doctor warmed up to them is just kind of laid out as a massive info dump. It's obviously meant to be a way to get new viewers caught up to date with all the like lore, but it feels kind of out of character for the Doctor to be so open so quickly. There's a short scene at the beginning where they play around with this concept of traveling back in time, stepping on a butterfly, and then changing all of existence. They've mentioned it before in previous episodes, but this time they actually show the consequences. Again, this feels like funny and playful, which I quite like, and you can tell they've obviously got a bigger budget and they're doing more with special effects. I wouldn't be mad if this kind of like silly humour carries on throughout the series. They land on a mystery ship and are immediately escaping new monsters. With Ruby's first experience on a spaceship, we can pull almost identical comparison between Rose's second episode, where she's dealing with the ideas of how the human race moves on, the fact that her mum is long gone, and how that's shocking for her, and then the Doctor comforts her by reassuring her that it's all still out there, and the fact that he then fixes her phone so she can contact her mum in her time. While Ruby's episode uses this exact same template, I can't help but feel like it's a lot more surface level. There's definitely not the same depth of emotion and realization as with Rose's. It just feels like another way for the Doctor to show off his tricks to a new audience. And now we meet the space babies, who after being abandoned by all the adult crew have been left running the station by themselves.
Captain Poppy, when was the last time that you had a hug?
Never.
Come on here, it's okay. It's okay, it's okay. Shh, 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 shh.
This is so cringe. Nobody would ask that. It feels like a really forced way to be like, now we get to hug all the babies. There's another mention of the Doctor being abandoned as a child. This has been a very common occurrence so far. Damn it, Chris Chibnall's storyline, ruining it for everyone. They show the babies downstairs, there's a bogeyman, and the Doctor keeps laughing while the babies are crying, just like a psycho. The Doctor figures out that the baby making machine had glitched and had created the bogeyman as part of like a children's story to almost keep them entertained. And because the machine's literal, it's made out of actual bogies.
Oh, this is disgusting!
After stopping the baby's nanny from launching the bogeyman out into space, the Doctor figures out how to move the space station by launching all the baby's built up dirty nappies out of the airlock and propelling it forward, presumably just scattering a load of poo-filled nappies across space. Fun fact, organic material doesn't degrade in space, so those nappies are going forever. Possibly the worst case of fly tipping ever committed. And the Doctor and Ruby are off again, but not before the Doctor explains that the one place they can't visit is when Ruby was born to find out who her mother is. I'm sure this is alluding to the future. Overall, I feel like this was a very weak storyline, purely based on the fact that someone thought space babies was a funny concept and tried to build a whole episode around it, and it just didn't work. The whole episode felt very like spoon-fed and babyish, which I guess is fitting. In this episode, space babies and one space babe was said 14 times, which might not sound a lot for an hour-long episode, but boy was it noticeable.
Space babies! 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 Space babes! Space babies! Space babies!
Someone really thought they had it with this one. They thought they were so funny. Haha, space babies, everyone's gonna love it. No, it was crap. I also feel like there isn't really any conclusion with the bogeyman monster. Like, obviously, yeah, it didn't deserve to die just for existing, and we aren't aware of it having done anything other than being scary. But like, what is it now? Just their pet? They're taking it to some refugee planet, which, if it was so inclined, as soon as they land, it'll just go and kill and pillage everything around them. I feel like this is one of the typical scenarios where the Doctor would be like, I'll go take it to a planet where it can't hurt anyone. But no, he just leaves them to it. Like I said earlier, this episode feels like a speed run of Doctor Who trivia, and it literally ends with the Doctor giving Ruby a key to the TARDIS after knowing her for like 2 days. This was not a strong start to the new series. With the double bill for the new series launch, we get straight into the next episode, The Devil's Chord. We open with our villain Maestro escaping through the Devil's Chord in the 1920s. And I love the energy of this character. It feels like theatrical but also scary, and also like really unhinged, so you don't know what's going to happen next. First criticism though, the transition into the intro music was awful. Just awful. They tried it, it didn't work. They should have cut it. Over to the Doctor and Ruby. I love how the Doctor and Ruby both get dressed up into outfits to fit into the time. This is definitely more of a trend for this series than previous ones. Normally the Doctor sticks to like the same time static outfit, but Ncuti's Doctor does have more than that, and the outfit changes keep coming. It's funny and playful. I like the silly Doctor, as long as it doesn't go too far. The Doctor and Ruby go back in time to the 60s to watch the Beatles record their first ever album, but something's changed and they seem to have lost all their musical talent.
My dog is alive, he's not dead.
The writing here is trying to make things seem really like deeply emotional and moving, but the characters aren't talking like normal people.
It's like sometimes, late at night, I get this thought. It's a note, a single note, and then a second, and if you put words to it. I love you.
What I don't understand here is that music hasn't fully gone. It's just bad now, and people seem to like really hate music. But surely Maestro would want music if they feed off it. I'm just not sure it makes sense. I found it really interesting that they choose to refer back to the first Doctor living in London with his granddaughter Susan in the 60s, but then it gets really dark again and refers back to the Time Lord genocide.
Where is she?
I don't know.
How do you not know?
Time Lords were murdered. Genocide rolled across time and space like a great big cellular explosion. Maybe it killed her too.
They lure Maestro out by getting Ruby to play the piano, and as soon as the Doctor realizes what's going on, he goes running. And once again, he's crying. The only way that the Doctor and Ruby get away is because someone else then starts playing the piano, and Maestro goes for them instead. But it doesn't even really show anyone getting killed. I really don't understand what's happening. Are they trying to be like super family friendly? The Doctor explains that Maestro is a part of the Pantheon and a child of the Toymaker, and they're all basically godlike creatures with really strong powers. And Maestro is the embodiment of music, whatever that means. They then travel back to present day to see the carnage of what a world without music looks like. I find the whole premise of without music the world dies a bit dramatic. Like, I'm sure it would be a depressing place, but there's other things that people live for, right? I just think it's a bit of a stretch. Now back in the 1960s, the Doctor and Ruby are trying to find the right chords to banish Maestro away.
There's a hidden song deep inside our soul.
This is so weird. What does that mean? Maestro also refers to an oldest one, which I'm sure will get revealed later in the series. They then proceed to have a music battle, which is honestly one of the cringiest things I've ever seen. Like, the Doctor playing the piano behind his back. What is that? What is that? Maestro is genuinely a scary villain, I think, and the fact that they managed to trap the Doctor and Ruby, it's then only because of the Beatles' musical genius that Maestro eventually gets trapped. I feel like this was a good way for the story to come to a conclusion, and the Doctor is crying again.
One who waits is almost here.
Well, that's fun and cryptic. Music returns and all is right in the world, and then
There was always a twist at the end.
they break out into a fully choreographed musical number. I don't understand what they're trying to do with this. What is this? What is this? This isn't Doctor Who anymore. Any redeemable qualities about this episode have gone out the window as soon as the entire cast break out into song and dance. I was on the edge of my seat waiting for a cut to the Doctor and Ruby being like, what the hell just happened? But no, they just carry on like it was normal. And then there's like a musical piano on the floor. What is this? It just feels like this whole thing has been made for really young kids. Unless it turns out the whole thing was a musical fever dream, I'm really hoping that's the case. I was really trying to be optimistic with this episode. I feel like Maestro as a character is really interesting and the actor did a great job. But the amount of surrealism in this episode really brought me out of the story. Doctor Who has always been very stereotypical sci-fi, but there have been magical elements here and there. I just feel like this was a lot to throw in all at once. Not to say that we can't have those elements, but I feel like it was just a bit of a shock to the usual format. This was distinctly an episode I didn't enjoy. This next episode was a really interesting and challenging format for the Doctor. For the whole episode, he's stuck standing on a landmine, trying to prevent it from going off, restricting him from his usual format of run. The background context for the storyline is that it's set in the middle of a war zone, and there's these landmines spread all over the place. There are also these robot ambulances, which will save money by killing you instead of healing you. And we also see this familiar face. As the Doctor arrives in his usual run first, ask questions at the same time style, he then runs directly onto a landmine, where he stays balanced for the rest of the episode. The Doctor asks Ruby to look for a good-sized rock. They're surrounded by rocks. Ruby finds a gross, fleshy tube, and it's a highly compressed human body. So gross. I actually found something similar when I went and did my food shop. The Doctor doesn't want the landmine to blow up with Ruby right next to it, so he asks her to throw the fleshy tube at him to help him balance his weight. But instead, Ruby wants to give the Doctor the best chance of surviving, so she walks up and hands it to him directly. It's nice to see her character not just doing everything the Doctor says without question, unlike some of the previous companions. And the Doctor is crying again. The fleshy tube's AI activates and the Doctor's able to gather a bit more information about what's happening. The Doctor explains that Villengard is the biggest weapons supplier in the whole universe, and they optimize their products to keep war going, which includes having a certain number of casualties, which is why they will sometimes kill the sick to keep the war going.
War is business, and business is booming.
Cold lines. The daughter of the flesh tube has somehow walked all the way out into the middle of the battlefield and keeps going, "Where's my daddy?" I don't know if it's the writing or the acting, but this child is just unbearable. And then she runs at her dad's hologram and nearly fucks the whole thing up. And more tears. Someone get this man a tissue. Another soldier turns up and also apparently wants to screw everything up as well. She shoots at the Doctor to try and get him to drop the flesh tube, which then activates the ambulance. It's not a bad premise, but the writing is really trying to push this premise of Anglican Marines. It's something they've done before in one of the Weeping Angels episodes, where I'm pretty sure all those soldiers refer to each other as clerics.
Since when was the church an army?
Since most of your history, you've been living in a blip.
Which is fair. The girl is just looking at pictures with her AI dad as if she doesn't realise that he's dead. The way the landmine works is it turns the subject into the bomb, and because the Doctor is all time and space, timey-wimey, complicated stuff, basically, if he blows up, he'll blow up half the planet with him. In order to distract the ambulance from the Doctor, the soldier, Mundy, suggests that Ruby shoots her with her gun on the lowest setting. So she's injured, but not badly. But another soldier in the distance sees Ruby with the gun and shoots her instead. Honestly, I was audibly gagged. This was a shocking twist from the writers, and it also gave Ncuti time to practice more of his on-screen crying. The only hope to deactivate the landmine is for the Anglicans to surrender and end the war. The Doctor works out that the whole war has been going on for no reason. There isn't another side. They've just been fighting the weapons algorithm, which has been maintaining a steady casualty rate. Honestly, he kind of rips into all religions here.
I mean, most armies would notice that they were fighting smoke and shadows, but not this lot. You know why? Because they have faith.
Shut up!
Faith, the magic word that keeps you never having to think for yourself.
The Doctor pulls this weird dad-to-dad card with the AI and gets it to scan the system and show that there were no enemies on this planet before they got there. Now we have time for a heart-to-heart between these two soldiers that I don't care about before they reveal their love for each other, and then the guy gets electrocuted and dies right in front of her, which is meant to be sad, but like, is it just me? I'm being given any context or motivation to care about these characters. Now he's just a flesh tube too. They've been scattering these flirty bits between these two characters, but I just don't care. They make all of these characters seem so unbearably stupid. Why would I care if one of them dies?
John, tell your daughter to run now.
I'm safe with Daddy.
This girl. As the countdown nears its end, they all kind of just accept that they're gonna get blown to smithereens until AI Dad swoops in at the last minute, deactivates the bomb, and revives Ruby through the ambulance.
The whole Vanguard mainframe has been taken down by parent power.
Cringe, so cringe.
Basically, just wait till Daddy gets home.
I'm cringing. That's all I have. When the Doctor and Ruby are saying their goodbyes, they're acting like they have this really deep connection with these girls, but what? They were useless. They did nothing. They sucked.
No lingering, plenty more universe to see, and quite frankly, your lifespan sucks.
We're all dead eventually.
It's hardly any time that we're not dead.
It all feels a bit morbid. I feel like there's a solid chance Ruby will die at the end of this season. They're really playing with it. With this episode, my hope for the series is slowly coming back. It was an interesting format, which is always really good to experiment with, and it gives us a chance to see our characters in different scenarios. While we did see Ruby demonstrating some independent thought away from the Doctor, I feel like the fact that he was so physically stuck in one place, this would have been the perfect opportunity for Ruby to go away and explore, like having to go out on her own to find something to help, having to come up with solutions without the Doctor's influence. I think that would have been nice to see. But like I said with these side characters, I did not relate to them at all. I didn't care about their storylines. I didn't care if they lived or died, which isn't a great reflection on the writing. In comparison, I can think of so many other single episode characters where I was fully invested in their survival, like Gwen in The Unquiet Dead, the crew on The Impossible Planet, Sally Sparrow in Blink, and all of the characters who died in Voyage of the Damned. Oh, I cried. These characters were given personality and backstory, and that's why you cared about them. But these characters felt very one-dimensional. You're meant to care about Mundy because she fancies another soldier, but it's not even clear if she likes him back until he dies. And then you're meant to care about the kid because her dad died, but she is so annoying. I wish it had been her instead. Okay, 4 episodes down, 5 more to go. On to episode 4. And off the back of the comments I made on the previous episode, we now have a whole storyline focused around Ruby being abandoned by the Doctor and having to make all her own decisions. Fingers crossed for this one. When the Doctor and Ruby land on the Welsh coast, the Doctor accidentally steps on a fairy circle and breaks the binding of a spirit called Mad Jack. The Doctor then vanishes, leaving Ruby alone with a mysterious woman signing to her in the distance. But every time Ruby tries to approach her, she just keeps moving away, always 73 yards. When Ruby crosses paths with another hiker on the trail, who looks strangely familiar, Ruby asks her to talk to the woman and see what she says, but instead from the distance all Ruby sees is the woman approach her and then run screaming in the opposite direction. Ruby then makes her way down to a local pub with this woman still 73 yards behind her, and then they make this weirdly aggressive joke when Ruby asks if she can pay for something with her phone.
I haven't got any cash on me. Can I pay with my phone?
Can you what?
Can I pay with my phone?
How do you pay with your phone?
Oh, well, it's sort of like online banking, but the phone can transfer money from my account into...
Yes, you can pay with your phone.
I don't know if it's meant to be implying that she's in a different time to her own and the audience and Ruby doesn't know that, but then it's all just a joke and they think it's a dig on Wales not being up to date with technology. Maybe if you're from Wales, that is a thing. That's not something I would have assumed, but there's also still loads of random shops that won't take payments on your phone for whatever reason. So it just almost felt like a bit of boomer humor. Maybe? I don't know. It felt out of place. But yeah, these people just seem really standoffish towards Ruby, which never really gets explained. Again, Ruby explains to the people in the pub about the woman who's been following her, and another person goes and approaches the woman, but the same thing happens again. He gets close, hears what she's saying, and then goes running. The people in the pub start explaining to Ruby about what the fairy circle was, and they talk about curses and magic, but then they all laugh it off like it's a joke, so you don't really know whether to take what they've said seriously or not. But we know something obviously has happened to the Doctor. Time passes, and Ruby, having still not heard or seen anything from the Doctor, decides to head home, with this woman still keeping 73 yards distance even when she gets the train. Ruby then obviously explains everything that's happened to her mum, and then lets her mum go and approach the woman. Surely not. And just like the other two, her mum goes running in the complete opposite direction, but it's made clear now that she's running away from Ruby. She won't accept her calls, she changes the locks, so Ruby's kicked out of her own house. It's so upsetting watching this whole process unfold, and you think, why did Ruby let her mum go talk to her? You knew what was going to happen, but we still have no explanation as to why. Kate from Unit comes to help Ruby with a whole team, and she speaks very very openly about who Unit are and what they do in a public cafe, which seems very out of character. The SWAT team close in, and just as they're approaching the woman, Kate hears something over the earpieces, and the same effect happens. They all pack up and leave. Now completely abandoned and alone, years pass and Ruby's life goes by, all the time with this woman in the background, but not like a threat anymore. If anything, it feels like it's become a comfort, like the only person that hasn't left her is this woman standing 73 yards away, which is a really interesting perspective to take. 20 odd years pass and Ruby's now in her 40s, and she sees Mad Jack, or Robert Ap Gwilliam, on the news. This is someone who the Doctor referenced earlier in the episode as the most dangerous Welshman who almost starts a nuclear war, and now he's running for Prime Minister in Ruby's present day. Ruby realizes why she's here, to stop him before he starts a nuclear war. Ruby works her way into his campaign, he becomes Prime Minister, and just as he's at the height of his power, about to be given nuclear launch codes, she does all she can do. She takes her 73 yards, she puts that mystery woman in his path, and he goes running, abandoning his campaign and losing all respect from the public. Another 40 years go by and elderly Ruby goes to visit the TARDIS again, still with this woman following her. She did this amazing thing, but the rest of her life sounds like it's been so sad and lonely. There's this awful scene where elderly Ruby's lying in her bed, presumably about to die, and then this woman suddenly appears in front of her and launches herself at her like a horror film. But then Ruby's transported back to the day her and the Doctor first landed on that coastline, but this time she's in the perspective of the woman. She manages to send a message to her past self warning them not to break the circle, and 2024 Ruby stops the Doctor just in time. And then the two original Doctor and Ruby carry on like nothing happened. Now, I was really impressed with this episode. It was another great format and it gave us a lot of insight into Ruby's character without the Doctor. We get to see her determination to keep going even when everything in her life has fallen apart. And we see that she obviously has a truly good heart because she's willing to put everything else aside to do the right thing and stop Mad Jack from starting a nuclear war. And she keeps pushing through right until the end of her life. However, my main criticism of this episode is I don't get it. Maybe I missed something, but the mystery woman doesn't look like Ruby at all, like not even like her old version. It's a completely different person. I watched all the behind the scenes for this episode as well, hoping for more of an explanation, and they did an interview with Russell T Davies, who wrote this episode, and talked about what is it that the woman is like signing, what's the symbols that she's doing the whole way through this episode, what is it that she says that makes all the people turn and run away, and he says, oh, I'll never tell anyone what it was, which is literally just a way of saying he couldn't come up with anything. Seriously, there's no explanation at all. How disappointing is that? I still think this episode was good, but it was just really lacking like a solid conclusion ending, wrapping everything up and making everything make sense. But at least from those first two episodes of the series, we've only gone up in standards so far. From the preview of this episode, I was already rolling my eyes from the boomer criticism of young people addicted to technology don't know what's going on around them. Like, oh, what's the world coming to? Young people these days, kind of dead humor. But I'm happy to say that while a bit cringy at some points, this episode goes beyond that like naive perspective and actually has a lot more to say. And another new format, we like mixing it up. Much like the Sally Sparrow episode Blink, this story has the Doctor and Ruby take a backseat, while we follow Lindy in her social media bubble, navigating the world of posh Nepo babies living and working in their digital pods. Meanwhile, unknown to these super cool influencers, giant slugs are snatching and eating people in broad daylight all around them. We see the Doctor trying to get through to speak to Lindy on her display, but she blocks him, and then eventually Ruby gets through to try and warn her about the monsters. When nobody in Lindy's office is replying to her, Ruby manages to convince her to look beyond her bubble, where she sees that everyone is missing and one person is being eaten right next to her. Their bubbles literally tell them how to do everything, including where to walk. So this seems quite funny when Lindy lowers her bubble and then realizes that she doesn't know how to walk without the instructions. Somehow she manages to leave the office without getting eaten by any of the slug monsters. We also get another glimpse of our mystery woman. This time she's Lindy's mum. People keep disappearing from their bubble network, and Lindy even sees one of her friends getting eaten on camera. The Doctor then explains that there's exit points throughout the town, but they'd all have to leave their bubbles in order to find them. Lindy's dot then runs out of charge, so she has to do the next stretch on her own. Luckily, she finds social media star Ricky September, and he guides Lindy through the slugs and they make their way to the exit. Just before Lindy and Ricky manage to escape, the Doctor realizes that the slugs have been eating people in alphabetical order based on their bubble profile names, and this is because the bubble system's turned against them. They've worked their way through the list and Lindy Pepperbean is next. When Lindy tries to turn her dot off, it fights back against her and tries to kill her until she tells it that Ricky September is actually Ricky Coombs and he changed his name, and then it kills him instead. No! This girl, now I want her to die. Poor Ricky, he was the only one who had any substance to him. Lindy makes it to safety and tells the Doctor and Ruby that Ricky went back to save other people like nothing happened. Just straight up lies. Even though they literally saved her life, Lindy seems to have so much disdain for the Doctor and Ruby for some reason. Lindy's character is very much meant to be like a spoiled brat, but you're still kind of rooting for her to survive until that last bit. Now the biggest plot twist of this whole episode comes right at the end when they've made it out to safety. The Doctor's ready to whisk them off to a new planet to rebuild, but he's met with the most vile response and the awful realization that these people will not follow him anywhere, even if it's to save their own lives, because he's black. I found this scene so upsetting at the end, and I'll be completely honest, I did not see it coming. I felt very emotional watching this scene, especially because of Ncuti and Millie's performances. They did such an amazing job at conveying those like really real emotions. And I did cry watching this, and I cried rewatching it as well, and I might even cry again now. I just think taking on such a serious issue is really important, and the way it was written into this episode was so clever and a complete contrast to some of the previous episodes, which were obviously trying to shove a moral compass down the audience's throat. Like with the Rosa Parks episode, where it felt like they were trying to plaster racism as bad in every scene. Like, yes, we know that, but show real people and real characters experiencing and dealing with those issues in a way that will make an audience respond. Instead, this episode really made me think and call myself out on the fact that I didn't notice the cast had no diversity at all. Only after this realization as well did I pick up on other things that Lindy had said earlier in the episode, like, I thought you just looked the same, I know this is wrong, he will be severely disciplined, he's not as stupid as he looks. Like, those alone now seem like such obvious red flags of her perspective and the fact that they were only directed at the Doctor. And at this point, I definitely feel like the Doctor is justified in crying here. I definitely think this just demonstrates why having diversity specifically in the role of the Doctor is so important. Because when the character is a white male, he faces no boundaries throughout time and space. He isn't belittled, he steps into an authoritative role in almost every scenario, and we never have to see him be directly confronted about his race, gender, or sexuality. And those are really complex and meaningful topics to build stories around. With Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, I know they did obviously try and write into the storyline plots about her being a woman. I can't bear to watch through all those episodes again just to find you some more examples. They're clearly so unmemorable because the only episode I can think of is the Witch Hunter episode where the Doctor and Graham are together, but everyone assumes that Graham is the Doctor and in charge and not her, clearly because she's a woman. And then they also try and drown her as a witch because she's talking all sciencey and smart. Clearly any of the other scenarios presented to me as a female viewer weren't meaningful or relatable enough for me to hold on to them. Oh, it's riled me up. Could I do it? Leave a comment below if you would like me to do an analysis of the 13th Doctor seasons. I would do it, but only for you and only if you ask nicely. Now, oh boy, was I excited for this one. My only concern was that we get another completely out of context musical number because Jonathan Groff was in this episode. Otherwise, I'm here for the period drama of it all. The monster twist in this episode wasn't really a surprise at all because it was plastered all over the trailer and within the first minute of this episode. But we're in the early 1800s and a group of bird-like aliens are disguising themselves as socialites. They're making their way through the town by killing people, upgrading their social status, and transforming into the people they killed. When the Doctor and Ruby arrive, they're just there for some fun. They want to dance and live out their Bridgerton fantasy. And the Doctor has given Ruby some psychic earrings so she knows all the dances. Apparently it also has a self-defense mode. And once again, Ruby sees this mystery woman, but this time in a painting, and still no explanation. The Doctor notices a handsome stranger watching from the balcony and proceeds to relentlessly flirt. You can also hear a string version of Bad Guy by Billie Eilish in the background here, which made me think, is this not actually the 1800s? Is this a different time period just disguised? But no, it is. The BBC just decided they wanted to sprinkle some Billie Eilish in there for the young folk. The lady of the house then becomes the next victim of the bird people, and the Doctor and his new friend Rogue find the body, but they both think the other one is the killer. And that's because Rogue is not from this world, he's actually an intergalactic bounty hunter sent to catch the shapeshifter, which he now thinks is the Doctor. Before Rogue sends the Doctor off into the abyss, they continue to flirt over Kylie Minogue. This bit goes on for a while. Eventually the Doctor convinces him he's not the shape-shifting killer and they team up. Although, now the Doctor knows there's a shape-shifting killer on the loose, he seems more than happy to continue flirting and leave Ruby alone with potentially a room where anyone could be the killer. The Doctor tampers with Rogue's death triangle, and now instead of killing you, it would send you to a random barren planet where you can't hurt anyone. The Doctor says he's done this because he doesn't think it's right to just kill the shapeshifter, but sending them to a barren abandoned planet is just the same as killing them, surely. If anything, it's slower and crueler as they starve to death. This kind of gives similar vibes to the 13th Doctor's. We're not going to kill the massive spiders, we're just going to lure them into a bunker, shut the door, and leave them there to starve to death because I don't like murder. Like what? What? Doesn't make sense. In comparison, Christopher Eccleston's Doctor goes out of his way to try and take Margaret the Slitheen back to her home world so she can be put on trial, but then she gets turned into an egg and has a second chance at her whole life. Very wholesome. Imagine if the Doctor had just locked her in a room and said, I won't kill her, but she's gonna starve to death in there. And the intention was obviously justice without cruelty, and that's meant to be a very core part of the Doctor's moral compass. The Doctor has obviously already caught major feels and is inviting Rogue to come traveling with him and Ruby, and then they almost kiss, but stop. We're only halfway through the episode. Stop teasing me. These two sexy men can hardly contain themselves. Meanwhile, Ruby and a girl called Emily find the housekeeper's dead body now, and they still think there's only one Cholder out there. The Cholder are the bird people. I didn't say that. Now the Doctor explains that the Cholder like the fun of dressing up and shapeshifting into people. They like pretending for the drama and the excitement, and cosplaying is a fair comparison that they make here. But then they keep using the word cosplay and like cosplaying aliens. And even the Cholder use the word cosplay, even though that's obviously a made up human thing, the idea of cosplaying. So it gets a bit cringe again, and it feels like they've gone, oh, what do young people like? Cosplaying? Let's make a whole episode about aliens that like cosplaying. Also, they reference Bridgerton way too much. Like, this time period exists outside of that show. Sure, Ruby makes a reference to it because it's from her time and it probably would be very relevant for her, but the fact that they keep going on about it is just off-putting, and again, it pulls you out of the story. I don't watch a show about all of time and space just to be continuously reminded about a Netflix show that is advertised everywhere. They then decide to draw the Cholder out by creating drama that they can't resist. So the Doctor and Rogue dance together before Rogue then pretends to propose and the Doctor runs out. This whole scene is so funny because it feels really silly and it's basically written like fan fiction, but it works. Arguably too well because they now have 4 Cholder after them, and we get a classic Doctor Who handhold and run. They manage to hide, but they have to fix the trap now so that it can hold all the Cholder and it'll only work once. Meanwhile, Ruby and Emily are still hiding in the house, but it turns out Emily is also a Cholder and now she wants to be Ruby. I'm not sure why the Cholder decide they're not going to hide anymore. They said they wanted to keep cosplaying until they got to the royal family, but then they decide to just completely break character so they can have this wedding, and now Ruby's one of them. Also, one of them kills the vicar and shapeshifts into him, but just his clothes, and stays looking like a bird. So what was the point? And the Doctor is crying again. I mean, fair, his friend is dead, but then they show like this cringe flashback of him talking to Ruby's mum, and it's just like, what? Just be sad because your friend is dead. You don't need to be like, oh, I promised her mum I would bring her back safe. You shouldn't have made that promise. You know you shouldn't make that promise. It never works out well. During the wedding ceremony, the Doctor and Rogue managed to get the Cholder all together and trap them in the teleport. But twist, Ruby's not actually dead. She was just pretending to be one of them, and she actually fought off the other Cholder.
I cosplayed.
Now I have problems with this scene. She activates battle mode on her psychic earrings and then proceeds to have the most half-assed fight scene I've ever seen. Now the situation is the Cholder are about to be transported to some random barren planet along with Ruby. So the Doctor has to decide, is he going to save his friend or is he going to save everyone else? This is a great setup and obviously torture for the Doctor. We then get a long-awaited kiss and Rogue manages to snatch the control off the Doctor before pushing Ruby out of the transport triangle and putting himself in her place. Surely by that logic, he could have just pulled her out. Why did he have to get in? Either way, Rogue now makes the decision for the Doctor and says find me before activating the teleport, and him and the Cholder all disappear. It's deep. It hurts. If we didn't have those other plot holes I pointed out, I would be in tears. Now Ruby comforts the Doctor for his loss and says how they can take the TARDIS and go look for Rogue, but the Doctor says, no, it's impossible, there's too many places he could be. So what, you're just not gonna even try? The TARDIS can scan for barren planets. But no, just no, the Doctor gives up. I understand they don't want to redirect the whole storyline to searching for Rogue, and Jonathan Groff is just meant to be like a guest star, but why not? They could go searching planets and get into trouble the way they always do. And eventually we get the payoff of them finding Rogue, and then maybe he decides to go off on his own anyway. But it kind of makes the whole build-up of their connection and sexual tension seem meaningless. I don't know if it'll be one of these things where the Doctor's like secretly searching for him in the background but just doesn't want Ruby to know about it. But even then, that's a bit rubbish. Now onto our 2-part season finale. I'm actually so disappointed it's only an 8-episode season. I don't know why they kept getting shorter and shorter. Up until the Jodie Whittaker era, all of the reboot were at least 12-episode seasons. And that really gives you time to get into the characters and explore those different formats. But I'm assuming assuming it just comes down to budget and they'd rather have like 8 well-produced episodes rather than 12 episodes with less of a budget. But especially with the double bill series launch, that's only 7 weeks of episodes. And then we have to wait another 6 months until the next Christmas special. It's warm. It's warm, okay? It's a new day. The final 2 episodes are out now, so let's get to the end of this series. After barely acknowledging this woman across all of time and space, this episode kicks off with the Doctor asking UNIT for their help finding her. On Earth, she's Susan Triad, an IT genius about to release all her technology for free to the world. UNIT have already been monitoring her, thinking it's a bit suspicious, and they highlight the fact that Susan Triad is an anagram for TARDIS, which I think is a bit of a weak plot point personally. Like, if I was an evil villain, I wouldn't be trying to sneak my name and hints and clues into things to help people find me. Another route they're trying to go down is mentioned in episode 2, The Devil's Chord, the fact that the Doctor has a granddaughter called Susan, and they're trying to make the connection that Susan Triad could be his granddaughter Susan, just older or in another regeneration. But again, this seems like a weird stretch to me. When the Doctor explains to Ruby about regenerating, she says like, oh, don't go changing your face, and he says, oh, I'm keeping this one for a long time, as if it's a choice, as if any of the other Doctors chose to regenerate. Kind of meaningless dialogue, if you ask me. UNIT tell us that ex-companion Mel has been working undercover in Susan's PR team, although when Susan tells her to just call her Sue, it seems like they've only just met. But the Doctor wants to talk about another mystery woman, Ruby, and then all these photos of Ruby start flashing up on the screen, like, is this meant to be a surprise birthday party?
Oh yeah, we tried to find my mum, but actually we even tried Davina McCall, but we got nothing.
Oh, I love Davina. I love Davina. Is she nice?
Oh, she's absolutely lovely.
What is this top secret government facility for? Kate is meant to be such a no-nonsense woman. Why have they got her licking Davina McCall's ass? The writers just need to send her a thank you note and move on. And theory number 3 is, since Ruby's mother can't be found anywhere and Susan Triad is everywhere, then maybe they're the same person. That makes no sense. Another random assumption with no real foundation to it. The Doctor explains that they can't use the TARDIS to go back in time to the night that Ruby was born because he'll be crossing his own timeline. Rose points out that the Doctor loves to break the rules, but then he explains that he thinks the snow that keeps appearing is a warning not to go back. Ruby has a VHS tape of security footage from the night she was born. She says it's really rubbish quality, but UNIT think they can use their technology to enhance it so they can see her mum's face. But that's not how technology works. I know it's all like sci-fi Doctor Who and stuff, but if something's recorded in 420p, you can't just enhance it to 8K. Anything that simulates that is just guessing where the pixels go and filling in the gaps, not taking a blurry woman in a hood and zooming into the face until you can see her clearly. While collecting the tape from home, Ruby's adoptive mother Carla decides that she has to come with Ruby to UNIT, but not for any real reason that makes sense. Not like, oh, I'm worried about you, what's this all about, I need to make sure you're okay. They kind of try and just link it into a reference to Donna, where Rose explains that her mother is a part of UNIT. Not that we see Donna in this whole episode. And then Carla's like, well, if your mum's part of it, then I should be too. Which is just a bit random because she doesn't actually have any real reason for going, and she also doesn't add anything to the storyline. While they go out, our other mystery woman, Mrs. Flood, the next door neighbour, comes over to watch Ruby's grandmother. She's a weird character, but a little bit funnier in this scene.
I nursed my old mum through diabetes and a hip operation. She died of an ulcer. But that was when I wasn't looking.
There's been some speculation I've seen online, because apparently Mrs. Flood's full name is Carol Flood, and people are saying Carol Flood, ooh, like a song and a water thing, kind of like River Song or Melody Pond. And so maybe it's going to be a reincarnation of River, but that seems like a kind of random thing to leave until the end of the series, and also very ominous from the character perspective. If it was River, you think it'd be a bit more like joyous, like she would have revealed herself already.
I would love a cup of tea.
Would you, sweetheart? Well, we'd all like a lot of things that aren't going to happen.
Okay, well, she seems like she might be a baddie. UNIT rightly secure Carla in another room because you can't just let anyone into a top secret facility. But then the Doctor just grants her access, like, it's Carla. I don't care. Who is this woman? It just seems weird. Like, she doesn't need to be there, and I feel like if anything, she's just going to be another casualty. UNIT have a time window that they've used to glimpse at seconds in the past, but they think with Ruby's tape, they can use it to enhance the image and see what's going on.
Don't worry, she's safe. I lost my family to the most terrible things. But the Doctor helped me.
Okay, Mel, bit of an unnecessary trauma dump. I just realised that looking into Ruby's past should 100% be a side quest here. They have a serious small window on the Susan Triad situation, and this feels not very time urgent. Like, it's already waited 20 years, it can wait another 4 hours. But apparently ignoring that, Ruby, the Doctor, and one of the UNIT soldiers step into a time window of 2004. I can't believe Ruby was born in 2004. The harsh reality that me turning into an actress and becoming a Doctor's companion is slightly getting away from me. The Doctor makes it very clear that they can't move even when Ruby Ruby's mum goes past. There's another weird bit where they try and make it all emotional, where they think it looks like Ruby's mum is crying and Carla's like, don't worry, I took her in. It's so cringe and unnecessary. And the doctor now seems happy to let the unit soldier move around the projection to see if there's anything else they can't see. I'm not sure how he steps behind the TARDIS when it's all a projection, but as soon as his voice is off screen, I'm pretty certain he's dead. The mum then fades from the projection, even though everything else is still there. At least Millie puts on a very good performance here.
Doctor, can I ask?
Morris, a second, please.
No, I'm sorry, I've got to ask. What is that?
There's a giant fuck off smoke monster that no one else has reacted to, and you're asking questions like that. So bizarre. Surely they'd be like, oh my god, doctor, look behind you. Not, doctor, can I ask? What is that?
Colonel Chidosi, you will report at once. Can you hear me?
Also, it's exactly where the soldier went to, and I'm sure if he could, he would respond, Kate. Carla then says, I know its name, it's the Beast. What? That's such weird dialogue from her.
What is it?
Waiting.
What is?
It's been waiting for so long.
So this is the one who waits. After the explosion, I don't know if this guy forgot his cue to duck, but he did not flinch a muscle. Balls of steel. And now we see the crispy soldier left behind and the smoke monster's gone. Now apparently this is enough to get the doctor back on track and go and talk to Susan Triad. All of which we currently have no reason to believe there's a connection between Susan Triad's tech company versus a smoke monster in 2004. And of course the doctor's crying again. Wouldn't be a shooty episode without some tears. The doctor finally meets Susan, but there's no spark, no connection. It's safe to say it's not his granddaughter. And because the doctor's been pissing him out in the time window for so long, Susan's about to go on stage right now to make her announcement. She doesn't have time to stop for a chit chat, but she does start saying about how she's been having weird dreams. And clearly something's not right. Back at unit where they're analysing the footage of the smoke monster, it appears that it came from the TARDIS. That same TARDIS, which is currently parked in the middle of Unit HQ. It looks like Susan's speech is getting hijacked at the exact same time the TARDIS is. And one of Unit's team, Harriet Arbinger, is another harbinger of the gods. Big surprise, haven't used that already. The doctor is all over the place and Susan isn't having a good time either. While all this is happening, the doctor sent Ruby back to the time window, which is supposedly broken, but still seems to be feeding off her memories of 2004.
And his one true name forevermore is
It was the wrong anagram. Well, that's embarrassing. Who didn't do their crossword today? Close but no cigar. And then we get a Susan Triad face reveal. Oh my gosh, this is scary. This is horrible. I hate it. Mel sees this guy turn to dust and doesn't think to maybe take a few more steps back, you know?
Did you think I was family?
Well, that's a double bummer for the doctor. At the end of this episode, my thoughts are, why is Carla there? She's adding nothing to the episode except from really random lines of dialogue that nobody would say. I'm still holding on to hope that they can tie all these loose ends together by the end of the next episode. Really hoping. We still don't know why Susan's appearing across all of time and space. We don't know who Ruby's mother is. And we definitely don't know how the doctor's going to defeat Sutekh. I had a look at some of the old clips from when Sutekh appeared in the original Doctor Who series with Tom Baker. And from my understanding, when Sutekh had broken free from his prison and was trying to make his way to Earth, the doctor trapped him in the time vortex halfway between both. But oh boy is he here now, and he is a literal god. Not the god of games, not the god of music, the god of death. And something tells me he's not about to mess around, you know? Okay, come on, please bring it home with the season finale. Now it's time for some big reveals. Time for all our questions to be answered, right? Back in where we left off and Sutekh starts turning people to dust, these first few people just kind of stand there and take it, but eventually everyone is running alongside Mel and the Doctor on their moped. In Unit HQ, we have the same results with Sutekh's power wiping out the entire unit team, including Kate and Rose. Again, they don't even try and run. I'll be honest, as shocking as it is to have these key cast members die, the problem is that I knew as soon as they started killing so many of them off that everything was going to get undone somehow, so it didn't really have any meaning. I don't think I would have cared if Carla had died anyway. We also see Mrs. Flood turn to dust, so no big reveals on that part. The Doctor and Mel get back into unit somehow, even though Sutekh is literally upstairs. And then the Doctor sends this soldier who's been guarding Ruby to the bunker. But just to confirm, he sent her to her death rather than saving her. She died. There's no escaping what's coming. In the memory window, a projection of the TARDIS is still there, but when the Doctor steps inside, it's not the TARDIS they're expecting. The Doctor explains it's a version of the TARDIS pulling itself through the time window through their memories. Enough for a version of it to become physically there. This TARDIS is like a little scrapbook of the past with lots of recognizable artifacts from different series. I like the idea of a memory TARDIS, but I'm not quite sure on the logic of the memory of a TARDIS can become a TARDIS. But then the image of an angel can become an angel, so I guess it lines up with Doctor Who logic. Sutekh has hijacked the original TARDIS and explains to the Doctor that when he was cast into the time vortex, he was weak, but he clung to the side of the TARDIS and regained his strength over time travelling with the Doctor. We also find out that our first mystery woman, Susan Triad, is Sutekh's creation. Every time the TARDIS would land with Sutekh holding on, he would plant a new version of Susan Triad in that world to live out a normal life until the time came for Sutekh to call on her. And now is time for her to spread Sutekh's dust of death. Not sure on the name. So now we know that Sutekh's power is not only ripping through Earth, but all of time and space. Mid-monologue, the Doctor realises that there's nothing stopping Sutekh from killing him, Ruby and Mel. So why hasn't he done it yet? Not waiting to find out, they run for the memory TARDIS and manage to narrowly make it out in one piece. As things look like they're falling apart in this memory TARDIS, the Doctor ties a loose bit of rope from one end to the other, and apparently that fixes things. It's intelligent rope, like the intelligent gloves, so it just fixes things. I hope they don't use this weak gimmick to solve everything going forward. I also don't understand how the three of them can have a laugh about surviving when they've literally just abandoned the planet to die. Oh, I realise Ruby hasn't actually seen anyone die yet, but when they look out over Earth, you can see the entire surface being encapsulated by this dust of death. Ruby obviously realises her mum is dead. She's sad, but they don't linger on it for very long. I mean, Mel and Ruby have just been hit with the fact that everyone they know and love has just died on Earth. But instead of coming to terms with that, they have to come from the Doctor in his self-pity, saying it's all his fault. Throughout this series, we've seen more of the Doctor's sensitive side, which is absolutely fine. But when it comes to the dynamic between the Doctor and his companions, you kind of want the Doctor to be the one holding it together for the sake of them. Instead, at this point in the series, it really feels like the Doctor's been the one who's been continuously falling apart, and the companion has had to be the one comforting him. Yes, have this sprinkled into the storyline to show the significance of certain events, but when it's recurring this often, it makes you think, is he still up for this? Like in The Devil's Chord, he's confronted with Maestro and doesn't know what to do, so he runs. In Boom, he's stuck on a landmine and doesn't know what to do. In 73 Yards, he steps on a fairy circle and gets yeeted out of existence. In Rogue, he loses his new gentleman friend but just completely gives up any attempt of going to find him. And even in the first part of this finale, Mel's having to give him a pep talk to go talk to Susan after having put it off for so long. Sutekh explains that the thing holding him back is his curiosity for the mystery around Ruby and Ruby's mother, and the fact that he can't figure out who she is. Some time has clearly passed, and the Doctor is out on some desolate and unrecognisable planet looking for scraps to fix the TARDIS. He finds a woman and they proceed to have such a weird interaction, just trying to give the audience context for how awful everything is. It seems like not only people are dying, but memories are disappearing too, presumably from the fact that Sutekh's landed in so many different time periods and now the timelines are messed up. The woman gives the Doctor a spoon because he has a nice face, and then spontaneously combusts into a cloud of dust. That was a tongue twister. And more tears. It just keeps going. Before she died, the woman keeps referring to like, this man told me the world is dying, memories are disappearing, but we never find out who this man is. And it seems like, again, it's just a really weak writing point for them to give the audience loads of explanation on what's going on. Mel isn't doing so good. I think she might be the next to go. I do like how they've referenced this 73 Yards episode twice now. Once when Ruby guesses the TARDIS's perception filter is 73 yards out and she doesn't know why. And then when the screen in the TARDIS shows her Robert Ap Gwilliam, even though that was an alternative timeline and she doesn't have any memory of it. But it does remind the Doctor that he introduced compulsory DNA testing in 2046. So if Ruby's mum was on Earth at that time, they'd be able to find a biological match. They then use the remaining power the TARDIS has to jump to 2046. And even though everyone is dead, this time period is only preserved because the Doctor previously landed there, making it a set point in time. During all of this, Sutekh reaches out to poor Mel and starts looking through her. He says for Mel to rest and that Sutekh looks through the dead, so I think Mel might be gone now. They start scanning Ruby's DNA to find a match, but Sutekh uses Mel to summon them back. And now Mel is in her Sith cosplay. They love cosplay in this show. Sutekh wants that name and he'll torture the Doctor to get Ruby to give it to him. But it seems like the Doctor and Ruby might have already had their own plan. Ruby gets just close enough to Sutekh before smashing the screen and hooking the intelligent rope conveniently onto Sutekh's dog collar. Meanwhile, the Doctor is summoning the TARDIS back to him. He looks like a really intense PE teacher here. They then hook Sutekh to the TARDIS and take off into the time vortex. This time with him not clinging onto the TARDIS, but getting dragged through time and space.
What happens if you bring death to death? You bring life!
As they're dragging Sutekh through the time vortex, life is spilling back out to where it was lost before, bringing all the people back who were killed from the death sand, including Carla and Mrs. Flood. So maybe she has more time for her plans now. Again, I'm not sure I understand the logic of bringing death to death, but I guess it's unwinding Sutekh's power. And the Doctor and Ruby have a nice little celebratory cuddle while Sutekh's still getting dragged behind them. The Doctor finally cuts the cord and sends Sutekh into the abyss, where we actually see him get destroyed by the time vortex. Back on Earth, where everyone's been brought back from the dead, Susan Triad is now just a normal person without Sutekh's influence.
You should have seen me. I had to walk home. I got in and your gran was telling me off for not dusting.
Carla is just such a nothing character. Everything she says, I'm like, who cares? I kind of wish Carla had died. It would have been more interesting if Carla had died and Ruby had had to deal with that than Carla just being there. She contributed nothing. They finally get the test results back, and it's time for the big reveal. Who is Ruby's mother?
My mother.
She's just a normal person. She hid her teen pregnancy and gave Ruby up as a baby. She's nothing magical or mystical. She's a nurse in Coventry. This is such a disappointing ending, learning who Ruby's mother is. Again, it felt like it got built up and up and up, and then they couldn't come up with a good enough idea, so they just gave up. Instead, they went down this weird, even the most ordinary people are special route, which is such a cop-out. Like, why did it snow around Ruby if she isn't supernatural? What is the hidden song in her soul that Maestro was talking about? And saying that her mum was pointing at the road sign to name her Ruby is so stupid. It makes no sense. Why would anyone do that? No one was there to see her. The only possible thing I can think of is if Ruby's mum isn't supernatural, maybe her dad is. And since she's going to be back next season, maybe that's something they'll reveal then. That's the last hope, honestly. This bit's also kind of weird. The Doctor's obviously flown Ruby to go find and meet her mother, and then at the last minute it's like he tries to convince her not to do it, as if the whole storyline hasn't been about the fact that Ruby's so desperate to know where she comes from. Obviously Ruby ignores him and goes and meets her. They have an emotional reunion, which I think was acted really well. And next thing you know, they're all back at Carla's flat, big happy family. It also sounds like Ruby told her mum all about the Doctor and time travel, so I guess we're not trying to protect his identity anymore, and everyone's just cool with it. I do like this ending to the episode where Ruby's obviously had her whole life turned around. She's found out who her mother is, which has been something she's been craving for such a long time, and she then chooses to go back to her life and stop traveling with the Doctor. Although I guess I was wrong, they didn't kill her off. Although if she's back for season 2, there's still time. Maybe Carla too. No, I like Ruby as a character, and I think Millie's performance of this role has been really, really good. They've just been let down with some bad writing. We have our last lot of tears from the Doctor as he leaves Ruby behind, and all the normies watch a spaceship disappear in front of them like it's no big deal. And we still don't learn who Mrs. Flood is. I don't mind an ongoing mystery, but it's been so heavily hinted to this whole series, and Mrs. Flood feels very connected to Ruby by the fact that she's her literal next door neighbour. So it would have just made sense for her identity to be revealed at the same time Ruby's story kind of comes to a conclusion. I'm looking forward to finding out more in the next series, but after the disappointing reveal of Ruby's mother, my hopes are not high for this one. In summary, let's start with how I would rank these episodes from best to worst. I've already gone into so much detail, but overall I think the episode that I probably enjoyed the most was 73 Yards. The only real criticism I have for this episode was the lack of explanation at the end, but we can have a bit of mystery. Other than that, the format was really interesting and I liked exploring Ruby's character more. Next, I'd say Dot and Bubble. Wow, it really seems like I don't like the episodes with the Doctor in. I obviously do like Ncuti's character, but I think these episodes without the Doctor have to work a lot harder and have a solid storyline, which some of the others were lacking. Again, this was an interesting format to follow, even if you don't like the main character, and then the twist at the end just got me. Then we have the Rogue episode. I wanted to put this higher, but I feel like the monsters could have had a bit more to them. And it's disappointing at the end where the Doctor doesn't even bother to go looking for Rogue. Like I said before, it makes it seem like anything you might have learned about the Doctor from his interactions with Rogue was kind of meaningless. Next, I combine the 2-part season finale. As much as I am so disappointed by the lack of conclusions on some storylines and the absolute god-awful reveal for Ruby's mum, other parts of the plot around Sutek were alright and brought an element of satisfaction from the reveal. I like the idea of linking storylines back to the Doctor's past, especially for those long-time Doctor Who fans. Oh my god, apparently I completely forgot about the Boom episode, which I guess is why it's in the bottom half. But yeah, the side characters completely ruined this episode for me. They were so annoying and useless, and I hate this child. Next, I put the Christmas special. It was never going to be much higher than this. As a Christmas special, it was fine, but it can't really compare to the other episodes. It's really there to create context for the rest of the series to explore, but that Goblin song did slap. Second to last, I put the Devil's Chord. The plot was not good, but I did really like Maestro's character, and I wish they could have just explored that more in a different way. And by far, the worst episode of the series for me, Space Babies. It's such a shame they decided to launch the series with this episode first, because I've heard several people say they didn't bother watching the rest of the series because this one was so bad. They will have alienated a huge portion of their potential audience by targeting this episode to most of the cast's age. The villain was bad, the characters that need saving are bad, and I don't feel like we really get much from Ruby or the Doctor's characters in this episode either. Now for some general thoughts across the series. I've mentioned it so many times, the Doctor cries a lot, which I don't hate. We love an emotionally intelligent man. However, I do feel that it slightly loses its impact when his emotions are this heightened in every episode. Like, from the audience perspective, the Doctor is so well traveled and has experienced so many amazing and heartbreaking things. You look to him to assess how serious a scenario is based on his experience. So when the Doctor is crying or shouting or showing these extreme ends of the spectrum of emotions, we want that to indicate, oh no, this is serious, which I think could be reserved for more specific situations rather than every episode. Otherwise, like I said, it loses some of its meaning. In my notes here I had, is the musical episode explained? No. And this has pissed me off beyond belief. Am I insane? Are you insane? Did the writers go insane while writing this episode? Because I am losing it. What a pointlessly weird and nonsensical episode. Fine, have them do a musical number. I love a sing-song, but just make it make sense. It just feels like a lot of this series was designed to make people speculate and debate online as to why these things are happening, but with no intention of an actual explanation in the plot. Just trying to like drum up conversation about Doctor Who. I think the head writer, Russell T Davies, even said that he put certain things in because he wanted people to be talking about them online. But that is such a disrespect to the fan base to put teasers to these things in throughout the episodes and then never give them an explanation that makes sense. I really like the idea of teasing something throughout a series for a finale conclusion, like this time being a mystery woman who is Susan Triad, another mystery woman who is Ruby's mum, and the other mystery woman who's Mrs. Flood, but also the mystery around Ruby and her birth and how so many things happen so coincidentally it doesn't seem like it could be coincidence, and having those things have a bigger meaning. Similar to the season 1 reboot where we had teasers of Bad Wolf throughout the series, and eventually in the conclusion finale we find that Rose sent those messages back to herself in time as a warning. But the payoff for this series subplot is very weak. Yes, we find out who Susan Triad is. Tick. Makes sense. We find out who Ruby's mother is. Does not make sense. We find out who Mrs. Flood is? No. Nothing. And there is no explanation at all around the weird coincidences that surround Ruby. Now, with all these criticisms, I'm not saying I could do better. I'm not a writer. I just feel that some of these storylines were so close to being there and then felt half-assed at the end. This was such a great opportunity to bring Doctor Who back with a bang and get away from all the bad publicity that the 13th Doctor got. Not Jodie Whittaker's fault, it was awful writing. But like I said, the rubbish start to this series will have put so many people off even trying to watch to the end. And those who did watch to the finale would have been so let down and disappointed by the final conclusions. So what's the motivation for people to continue watching into series 2 of this new reboot? I will continue watching the next series with the sincere hope that they try and make some of this stuff make sense. And I'd love to think that the writers would take on feedback from this series going forward, but the fact that season 2 has already been in filming for a while, we might have to wait until season 3. I do think Ncuti is a great Doctor and Millie was a great companion, just some of the storylines let them down. But this is just my opinion. Let me know what you guys thought of the series. For anyone who did stop watching after Space Babies, I'd still recommend you go back, watch it through and form your own opinions. And is there anything key you think I might have missed? I've seen so much speculation online, but I've tried not to let it influence me too much in this video. If you did enjoy this video and made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see me do next.
Space Babies!
That was it. That was the one. Do you get that?